Hey everybody, Motorpoet 59 here. I'm everybody knows that, or most everybody I suppose, knows that I spent my career at the railroad in the signal department. 40 years. I hired out in May of 79 and retired in October of 2019. I hired out with Southern Pacific. I retired from Union Pacific. And you know what? I liked my job. I liked it. I liked what I did. I loved being a signalman. When I hired out, they were pretty straight up about what I would be doing. As time went on, I got more seniority and more experience. I bid better and better and better jobs and made more and more and more money. And it was a good place to work. Did they pat me on the head and tell me I was a good boy all the time? No, they didn't. But you know what? I never expected that. I grew up in a real world. I don't need to be mollycoddled. I don't need to be talked nice to. I just need to be paid. It's my agreement with you. I agreed to do a job and you agreed to pay me for it. And I took my job seriously. And if you have a job, wherever it is, you should take it seriously. And you should expect nothing more than a paycheck. If your boss is a butthole, so what? You don't have to go home and have dinner with him and sleep with him. Do what you got to do and go home. Now, my point in bringing this up is that I'm on a lot of railroad pages, railroad history stuff, and invariably somebody will make a comment about wanting to go to work for the railroad, and these people are almost always inundated by negative comments from people who work for the railroad. And I stress who work for the railroad, because most people who have worked for the railroad and have retired were okay with their jobs. They came from a generation that didn't complain about everything that came down the pike like today's generation does. And I started looking at some of the profiles of some of these people who are complaining and telling people they shouldn't get, and most of them are young men, people who have 10 years or less at the railroad. And I don't know what they expect. And the same thing is happening now throughout the workplace. People expect too much from employers. They expect preferential treatment of some sort. My old boss used to call it starting at the top and working your way down. They expect too much pay. They expect too much of everything. When you go to work somewhere, you're the bottom guy. Unless you went to work with a PhD or a master's and they hired you specifically to do an upper level job, you're starting at the bottom and you're going to have to climb the ladder. And it might be a long ladder, maybe a tall ladder, maybe a flimsy ladder, but you're going to have to climb it nonetheless, or you can stay down there at the bottom and be miserable about everything all the time. Because if you are one of those kind of people, you're never going to go anywhere anyway. You're always looking for a reason to be unhappy, and that's one of the problems with today's generation. They're always looking for something to be unhappy about. They never see the cup half full. They never see the silver lining. When you've been through the things I've been through in the workplace and in life, you appreciate those silver linings. You appreciate the cup being half full. And I know there are people who've been through a lot like me who are still Nancy negatives. But today it's like everyone's that way. These young people, they don't want to get off the couch. They don't want to get out of their parents' basement where they play video games and think they're going to be rock stars or whatever. They don't get out and live in the real world, and they watch the news, the liberally slanted news that keeps reinforcing their position of being downtrodden, of the government stepping on the back of their neck and keeping them down. But what they don't tell them is it's the government that they elected, because these kids are almost always liberals and progressives, and they think the government is going to do something for them and make their lives better and make jobs just magically appear where they can go ride unicorns and slide down rainbows all the time. That's just not the reality of the situation. You have to get off your butt, put on your clothes, go get a job, and work your way up the ladder. That's the way the world works. And remaining where you are will only keep you in misery. I see people who see the things that I have now, and I live in a cookie cutter tract house, but it's a nice part of town, and it's a nice house, and it's been a good place to live. But it's nothing fancy. I don't drive fancy cars. I have a F-150. My wife drives a Ford Escape. I have a dirt bike and a Harley, and I have a new Harley, but I rode my last one for 19 years. I drove my last pickup for 15 years. You can't have everything at once all the time. You're not going to start out where I am today. That's not the way the world works. That is not a realistic way of looking at things. But the lapdog leftist media will continue to tell these people that this is where they should start. And when these journalists that are saying that's not where they started, some of them are still there. You read some of these things these journalists read, and I have a hard time believing these people went to school. They are so bad at writing, which means that their editors are just as bad at editing. Misspelled words, horrible grammar. I remember when journalism really was journalism. It is now just a way to keep people divided, particularly in the United States. These people have fallen for the lie, the liberal lie, that the government tells, we will fix all of your problems if you will only let us take more of your money and not complain about it. And you actually have people out there, young people today, saying, I'm willing to pay 50% of my income. That's because you don't have an income. If you're out there working your tail off the way I did, I don't want to pay 50%. I don't want to pay the taxes I do. But in the end, over the course of my career, my average federal tax worked out to about 12%. And sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. But people today don't understand what they're telling the government it's okay to do. They need to learn to complain about the government and stop complaining about jobs. They need to be happy because they know America is a special place and they can be part of that, rather than listening to the lie that America is a bad place and that they're always going to be stuck there if they don't vote for Democrats and allow them to take more of their money and gain more control over their lives. America's a great place. It's still a great place. It is still the greatest country in the world, but it won't be if this current generation, who doesn't want to work and doesn't want to be positive, keep going down the road they're on. Things will change for the worse. Parents, if you're a liberal and listening to this, which is highly unlikely, if you are, you hadn't got this far, but if you're a conservative and you know liberal, you have acquaintances that are liberal, try to tell these people, try to get through to them. I know it's hard, but if you change one mind, that's where it starts. My late mother was a voted Democrat because that's what her family always did. And when we got to talking, when I was about in my late 30s, one time, and she was telling me she was going to vote, and I don't remember who was running for what at that time, and I said, what? I said, it's not the way you feel about things. And we got to talking, and she said, wow, I didn't know I was a conservative. I just thought I was a Democrat because that's what my parents were. She ended up going to college and taking political science and became more conservative than me. The change can be made. And if it isn't, then all these problems that we have, all this negativity in America, all this nonsense about people not wanting to go to work because they're not going to get what they think they're worth. I'll tell you something, in the job market, you're worth nothing until you prove you're worth something. And if you continue to believe that you're worth something without proving it, you're always going to be disappointed. I don't know. What do you think about all that? Let me know in the comments below. Shoot me an email at motorpoet59@gmail.com. Like, share, subscribe, click on the bell if you want to be notified of future content. We'll see you all later.